presence on the Moon and crewed missions deeper into the solar system, including on to Mars. Now, here's a closer look at the mission and what Crew-11 will have to look forward to during their stay aboard the International Space Station.
International Space Station, one of humanity's greatest accomplishments so far. 15 countries working together and adding more all the time that have helped plan, build, and fly the International Space Station. And it just shows what human beings can do when we work together.
As Crew-11, we are about to launch on board a Dragon spacecraft to the International Space Station.
We are actually continuing ISS mission almost a quarter centuries. Right now, Crew-10 crew members are working very hard on the ISS. So we got that result, and actually we do more researches, then pass that information to Crew-12.
Конечно, исследования на Международной космической станции, как я считаю, они очень важны, и они являются ключевым звеном в развитии технологии, науки и всей цивилизации. И все самое лучшее из космоса всегда приходит рано или поздно на Землю в виде новых открытий, новых приборов, возможностей и технологий.
I'm very excited to see what kind of payloads we get to work with. It's a really interesting day-to-day life where 1 hour you might be fixing the toilet and then the next hour you're working on a physics experiment studying fundamental processes of our universe.
We're going to be up there for a lot of time. And we're going to, every day, be in space, look at the Earth go by, and accomplish some really amazing science. We will do material science and human research in space, lots of experiments, and then maybe do some spacewalks. It's a really fun crew to be on. We're going to enjoy every moment, and we're going to help each other to be successful and accomplish our mission.
So we have various kinds of difficult training together. For example, emergency training in Building 9 or emergency training in SpaceX. This kind of training actually made our bond stronger.
Наш экипаж Crew-11 – это экипаж, который состоит из высокопрофессионально подготовленных людей. И мне нравится этот экипаж.
In some ways, my only expectation for the mission is to fly and return home safely and still friends when we get back. There are so many things to play around with, to study, to explore, and I'm really open to every possibility, ways to engage with the International Space Station.
We all came from other crews. Kimiya, Yui, San, and I both came from Starliner 1. Oleg was on a Soyuz mission before this, and Zena, of course, was on Crew 9. But we all came together with our previous experience, melded into a really fun team, ready to go fly to our International Space Station.
And we're back at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida as we have a beautiful shot from our flight helicopter right there of the vehicle assembly building. The Artemis 2 mission, the rocket inside, will launch early next year. 4 astronauts around the moon. But we are focused now on that launch pad that you see right ahead of us, which is Launch Pad 39A and the Falcon 9 rocket with the Endeavour spacecraft on top of it. We've got 4 astronauts inside right now getting ready to launch to the International Space Station. And we've got Nick Hague, NASA astronaut, with us, co-hosting our launch broadcast today. And Nick, we have questions for you that have been coming in from social. Would you like to take a few more?
I'd love to take a few.
Been doing a great job so far, so let's put that next question up on the screen. This is coming in from #AskNASA. During CRS missions, these are cargo resupply missions with Dragon, I noticed that most of the time there is cargo in the trunk, but I never see any of the trunk during crew missions. Why is that?
Yeah, the crew missions fly up with an empty trunk, and that's really a mass constraint so that we can get those people up there. People require a lot of clothing, they require a lot of food, and all of those supplies have to get on, and so that comes at the expense of something in the trunk.
Great answer. T-minus 51 minutes and counting, and now we're counting down to the moments before we arm the launch escape system and start fueling the rocket. But before we do that, Let's send it over to NASA's Tony Jaramillo, who is standing by live at one of the best viewing locations here at the Kennedy Space Center. She's joined by NASA's Acting Administrator, Secretary Sean Duffy. Tony?
Hey, thanks, Daryl. That's right. This is one of the best viewing locations where our guests have an amazing view of the rocket at the launch pad off to my left here. And joining me is Secretary Sean Duffy, NASA's Acting Administrator. Secretary Duffy, did you have a chance to speak to the crew before they headed out to the launch pad?
I did. I was behind the glass yesterday with them. Again, I would tell you, they're right out of central casting. So smart, so personable. Especially Mike, who actually flew on the shuttle missions. But this is Zena's first trip into space. So yeah, I got to talk to them. And again, they seemed a little nervous, but really, really excited. And today is the big day. I think they're just waiting for the launch and getting to the space station.
Absolutely. We're all getting ready for that launch. As you get ready for your first launch as administrator, what would you like to say to the NASA and space community that continue to help pave the way to the stars?
So listen, I think the team has been so impressive at NASA, but also our corporate partners, again, SpaceX, Blue Origin, Boeing, that are building the vehicles that get us into space. And again, when we go to the space station, critically important. But what we learn on these missions is what's going to get us to the moon, and then from the moon to Mars, which is, I think, the direction that NASA has to be. We are space exploration.
Absolutely. As you get ready for your first launch experience, what have you learned from Crew-11, and what are you looking forward to learning as you lead NASA?
Well, listen, I've learned that they're really well trained. I'm coming from DOT. The safety components that go into making sure these launches happen and happen safely is really, really impressive. The checks, double checks, triple checks. But moving forward, listen, I'm looking forward to Artemis. So a lot of people don't know Artemis, right? We're going to the moon. We're going back. And in America's 250th birthday, Artemis 2 is going to launch. We are going to go around the moon and back. We're not going to land in that one. But then Artemis 3, we're going back to the moon. We're going to land. We're going to stay for 6 days. The longest time before that was 3 days. And then from there, we're going to start deploying all of the assets we need to build our base. And we're going to stay on the moon. We're not planting our flag and leaving. We're going to stay, learn, and then go to Mars. Again, there's critical real estate on the moon. We want to claim that real estate for ourselves and our partners, which is going to be critical to be successful in that mission.
Absolutely. A lot of exciting missions coming ahead. I mean, you just mentioned one. I guess what should be that next exciting mission that the public can look forward to?
Well, I think it's going to be Artemis 2, right? Again, going back to the moon. And again, sometimes you might think we already did that, right? We did that in the Apollo program. But what's happening with technology to get us there, it's revolutionary. And what I love is sometimes people go like, well, what does this mean for us on Earth? Why are we doing this? Well, there's the exploration point of being an American, and that's what we do. We explore. We were pioneers. But also what happens with our scientists, our engineers, the machinists, the welders, the jobs that are created, and the quality and innovation in rockets that are happening in America, and the time frame in which we can produce them is amazing. And we have great competition. Obviously, this is a SpaceX. So over here, it's a SpaceX rocket, which they have been remarkable. But again, we have our other players who are chomping at the bit, and they're great partners. And again, we want to have a vibrant private sector business that partners with NASA as we accomplish these missions.
Absolutely, and we are very much looking forward to Artemis 2. Secretary Duffy, thank you so much for joining us. Now we'll send it back to our team in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Tony. That was an awesome interview with Senator Duffy. We are also really excited to see what Crew-11 does and accomplishes on their mission. But now let's bring it back to Mission Control here in Hawthorne, and the teams are continuing to prepare Falcon 9 and Dragon for launch. Falcon 9 is the first orbital-class rocket that is capable of reflight. Together, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy have completed more than 519 launches and over 448 reflights.
Incredibly impressive. And today, the booster that Crew-11 will be using is going to attempt to land at Landing Zone 1, which is just down the coast from NASA's Kennedy Space Center in Florida. This will be the third flight of this particular first-stage booster after supporting a Starlink mission earlier and recently Axiom Mission 4. That was the successful fourth private astronaut mission to the International Space Station.
Rapid reusability drastically reduces launch costs, and it's the key innovation that is making space more accessible for the entire space industry as a whole. While this young booster is on its third trip to space, we are working towards qualifying our fleet of Falcon boosters and fairings to support up to 40 missions each. For those of you following along, we're currently at 29 flights of a single Falcon booster, which is absolutely wild. Increasing Falcon's flight count provides valuable information and data on repeated reuse, which is a super critical element in making life multiplanetary. This same spirit of continuous iteration and innovation does not stop with Falcon 9. NASA awarded SpaceX a contract to develop the US deorbit vehicle, a modified Dragon designed to guide the space station through a controlled re-entry into Earth's atmosphere.
And when the time comes and the International Space Station reaches its end of operational life, which, trust me, it still has a lot of life to give right now, Dragon will help achieve that safety orbit. During the CRS-31 cargo resupply mission, Dragon successfully performed a reboost test for NASA that demonstrated Dragon's ability to change the station's orbit, and we'll see a similar test coming up, and that'll help inform plans for the upcoming commercial resupply mission number 33 with SpaceX, where Dragon will fly an extended mission and repeat that reboost demo with a modified trunk called the Boost Trunk. This modified trunk will give Dragon the ability to change the station's velocity by up to 10 meters per second. And testing these added capabilities will provide NASA with additional options for station operations in the coming years.
And yet another innovation that SpaceX is working on is the intravehicular spacesuits, or IVA suits, that astronauts wear during Dragon missions. These suits are worn by the astronauts while they're inside the spacecraft, versus the extravehicular, or EVA spacesuits that are
go for propellant load and launch. For all operators in MCCX and Hangar X, both control rooms will go into lockdown at T-minus 45 minutes and will remain in that state until LES is disarmed. All operators are to remain at their console and maintain a sterile cockpit until MD confirms successful disarming of the launch escape system following orbit insertion or propellant offload in the event of a scrub. For non-urgent no-go conditions, brief the CE or LD and they will approve aborting the count. For urgent issues affecting the safety of the operation, operators shall call hold, hold, hold on the countdown net. Launch control will abort the launch auto sequence immediately and proceed into launch abort. At T-minus 10 seconds, launch control will be hands-off and relying on automated abort criteria for the remainder of the count. Operators advise launch director whether structural breakup or fire is imminent or occurring per Dragon manual flight escape rules. Launch control, you may proceed with arming the crew arm for movement.
Arming crew arm for movement. Crew access arm retraction started.
And we are watching the crew access arm rotate away from the Dragon Endeavour and the Falcon 9 rocket. That was an incredible view, Nick, from up high, 275 feet in the air.
Yeah, and so as the arm goes away, that's really your first unobstructed view out those two windows inside the Dragon capsule. Unique to Dragon for Soyuz flyers, there were no your windows don't open until you get all the way up to orbit and come out of the fairing. So here you can see what the weather's doing outside for yourself.
And there they are, strapped in, Crew-11. Our next big milestone.
Crew access arm retraction complete.
As we hear that the crew access arm has completed its retraction. Our next big milestone is to have the astronauts drop their visors and start up for Section 7 in their operations.
Dragon SpaceX, you are go for Section 6, close visors and arm launch escape system.
Tracking copies. Go for Section 6, closing visors and arming LES.
They may have renumbered the procedures because in the past it was Section 7. That's we may not have gotten that update. But this is a critical moment indeed. And that crew access arm, it can rotate quickly back to Dragon in this moment.
SpaceX, Dragon, visors closed, arming LES.
In this moment, in between, before they have the launch escape system fully armed. Right?
Indeed. So the commands that are available to Xena and Mike at the displays, she's arming the launch escape system now. As that's armed, there's also a button that's going to show up that'll allow them to do an emergency egress, which will command that arm to swing over rather rapidly. And by the time you're out of your seat and ready to open the side hatch, the arm's in place so that you can get to the escape tower.
From the escape tower, of course, they would zip line down to safety, to waiting vehicles, and then exit the
Launch escape system is verified armed.
The blast danger area. Now we have the launch escape system armed. This is a critically important system, Nick, that you actually had to use
Dragon copy.
on one of your missions, MS-10, back in 2018, that saved your life and the life of your fellow crew member. It's part of spaceflight today. What does it provide for this crew in this moment?
Yeah, in this moment, it's its safety net. So the launch escape system is constantly trying to determine, is everything going okay? And it does that with looking at a bunch of different parameters. But as long as those stay within bounds, it doesn't do anything. But if something changes, or if there is a handle that the crew can initiate the launch escape, if that's activated, then this is going to separate them from that rocket and get them to a safe distance. And it's from the point right now on the pad all the way until they're in orbit. They've got continual safety net there to protect them.
That capsule can get up in a hurry, too, as you were mentioning with these abort systems. They got to move quickly, going 436 miles per hour in a matter of 7.5 seconds. The Dragon can do that when it fires up its Super Draco engines if it were needing to get away from that pad in a hurry.
Yeah, absolutely. We're about to load the rocket full of fuel and oxidizer. And so if that energy is released, you need to be as far away from it as you can be. And so that escape system is designed to get them away in a heartbeat.
As long as everything continues nominally, it's our hope that that system will not be needed today. As we march towards loading those propellants Nick was talking about, that begins at T-minus 35 minutes and counting. Another big moment when they start flowing RP-1, Rocket Propellant 1, which is a refined form of kerosene, similar to jet fuel, as well as that oxidizer that together produce that 1.8 million pounds of thrust to lift that rocket and the crew into space.
Yeah, it's definitely an important moment, but it's also an exhilarating moment because this is when you start to hear the rocket come alive. The pumps and the fluid moving and the vibrations and it's, Dragon starts to have a personality, if you will.
You can hear those sounds, right? Valves moving and clicking.
You feel it, yeah. You hear it, you feel it.
T-minus 37 minutes and counting until liftoff. We're just 2 minutes away from beginning to load propellant into the Falcon 9 rocket. Weather is looking good at the moment. We are 90% go. There was a small concern for cumulus clouds in the area. That's just the 10% because of course, this is July in Florida. And you can see even now, Nick, the sea breeze from the cool ocean starting to create.
Tanks are venting for the start of propellant load.
Starting to create those little cumulus clouds bubbling up around the pad. We had a clear sky earlier. We're getting a little bit now, but overall, we're expecting that should be clear.
I see blue.
It's the glass half full. I like that. As long as we have that blue sky straight over top of the rocket and 10 miles out, we are good to go. And so far, right now, green conditions. The range is clear, the area around the pad. Boat traffic has been cleared by range operations. Our partners at the United States Space Force, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where Nick, of course, you in the Space Force, a brigadier general, have cleared the range. They are currently monitoring it, making sure that no one can get into the path of the rocket from down on the ground or in the ocean, for the reason that if anything were to happen and any equipment or any spacecraft parts were to come down on them, you wouldn't want to pose a risk to those below.
Yeah, public safety is important, but it highlights just the expansive team that even for this one place, the number of organizations that have to work together and they're necessary for success.
Our 4-person crew, 2 NASA astronauts, 1 JAXA astronaut, and a Roscosmos cosmonaut, seated in launch position, monitoring their systems on their heads-up displays. In the foreground on the right, that is a launch tower for Starship, the vehicle that SpaceX is currently testing and developing for use, among other things, in the human landing system for NASA.
The launch auto sequence has started.
And that's the call that begins the propellant flowing into the rocket. And now we are on an autonomous timeline counting down to 0 at 12:09 p.m. Eastern Time. This is a good milestone. It really signals that we're going to space.
Yeah, it's you know, the clock is definitely ticking. Up to this point, the crew's been strapped in for a little more than 2 hours. There's been margin built into the schedule just in case, you know, the side hatch doesn't pass its leak check or a suit doesn't, you know, whatever pops up, we've got a little margin. As we get closer and closer to liftoff, that margin disappears, and so now we're on a pretty tight timeline all the way down. You know, 35 minutes to launch. The visors have been closed since they armed the launch escape. It's been about 8 minutes. It's at this point where I'm sitting there going, I wish I had scratched my nose before I put my visor down, and trying to figure out how I'm going to do that, because they're going to be like this for another 45 minutes with the visors down.
Boy, that sounds like a long time when you put it that way. Well, there's great anticipation, right? This is the moment they've been training for, a year in the making. For Zena Cardman, who's essentially trained twice, even longer than that. They have been looking forward to this moment for so long and training so intensely, and here it is upon us.
Yeah, and you know, the time for reflection was in those 2 hours leading up to this point. At this point, now it's the mental rehearsing. They're chair flying exactly what's going to happen during the next 10 minutes when they lift off, and all the different things that they're going to need to do, as well as the couple few activities that they're going to have once they get to orbit.
Chair flying. That's what our astronauts are doing right now, and we'll stay with them as we count this down. For now, let's send it out to SpaceX in California.
As Daryl mentioned, propellant loading of both RP-1 and liquid oxygen began at T-minus 35 minutes, right on schedule. And weather is our main watch item right now. But I am hearing from our vehicle teams that everything looks good for both Falcon 9 and Dragon. So next up, at about T-minus 30 minutes, the SpaceX launch director will inform the crew when loading of cryogenic helium will begin. First on stage 1 and then on stage 2 about 4 minutes later. Stage 2 RP-1 loading should wrap up at about T-minus 20 minutes and 30 seconds. Then, as we approach T-minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds, we should hear a call out that Stage 2 liquid oxygen loading has begun. So with all of those consumables being loaded onto the rocket, if we have to call a hold for any reason at this point, like potentially due to weather, we would have to stand down and target our backup launch opportunity, which is tomorrow, Friday, August 1st, at 11:43 a.m. Eastern Time. That's because we have an instantaneous launch window today. So let's take a minute to do a little orbital mechanics 101. An instantaneous launch window means that we need to launch at exactly the right time, and that's driven by our planned rendezvous point, which is the location where Dragon and Station meet in space. Right now, the International Space Station is orbiting the Earth at more than 17,000 miles per hour, and Dragon needs to catch up to it. That means we have to deliver Dragon to the correct orbit. We do that by timing its trajectory relative to the orbiting laboratory so that they're both in the same place in space at the same time. A precise liftoff time is crucial for hitting that rendezvous point. Now, again, that means that at this point, if we hear a hold called, we'll be standing down and likely targeting that backup launch opportunity tomorrow. For now, though, we're going to go ahead and hand it back to Soumya and Joseph to talk to us about West Coast recovery. Soumya?
Thanks for walking us through that, Ronnie. We are now at T-minus 31 minutes and counting, getting closer and closer to getting our Crew-11 astronauts into space. Once their mission is complete and it's time for our crew to splash down back on planet Earth, they'll be heading to one of several targeted sites supported by SpaceX. Until recently, Dragon recoveries primarily occurred off of the coast of Florida. This year, SpaceX moved Dragon recovery operations off the coast of California to allow Dragon to complete its deorbit before safely jettisoning the trunk over the Pacific Ocean. When they return, Crew-10 will be SpaceX's third crew mission to splash down in one of the new locations. From-2 was the first back in April this year, followed by Axiom 4 in July. The new splashdown locations are near LA, Oceanside, and San Diego. The recovery vessel, Shannon, will be stationed in Long Beach to support the new West Coast splashdown operations. Spreading these supported sites across multiple locations helps to maximize the return opportunities, lowering the chance we'll have to wave off due to bad weather. And when the spacecraft re-enters, those in the immediate area may hear a brief double clap of a thunder-like sound known as a sonic boom.
I can't wait to hear one myself one day, but to hear everything that's gone on and to move operations to the West Coast has been incredible to watch, both from a SpaceX standpoint and from NASA, to see the teams across the country working together, the International Space Station Commercial Crew Program. And like Nick mentioned earlier, there's an army behind every one of those movements and getting ready and preparing for these West Coast splashdowns. So it's going to be phenomenal to watch and see NASA's first crew mission return on the West Coast. Well, back to today's mission, Crew-11, as they continue to get ready to go. They're inside now half an hour until launch time. Let's take a look at more and a bit more and learn about the astronauts flying today.
I think it's really innate in our human nature to want to keep exploring and to keep pushing boundaries. Everything that we do in space is ultimately for Earth and for the human species.
We are having a lot of good experiments on orbit, making new medicines. That is actually good for everybody.
By understanding how to live and work in space like we have with the International Space Station, we can now become a multiplanetary species by having bases on the Moon and bases on Mars.
И выполнение полета в космос, на мой взгляд, важно, потому что в конечном счете необходимо человечеству будет двигаться в дальний космос для того, чтобы открывать новые миры, исследовать новые и новые горизонты.
For me, it's a really compelling goal to go farther and farther afield in space and pushing our boundaries as a human species that way, learning more about our own home planet as we try to go farther.
We've been going and living aboard the International Space Station for 25 years. We're ready to make the next steps. We're ready to go to the Moon. We're ready to go to Mars. We're ready to explore the solar system. We understand the effects of what life in space does to the human body, and we need to continue those studies. We need to continue getting ready and get ready and go to the Moon and Mars, and that's why it's important to go to space.
All right, let's head back out now to a launch viewing location where Tony's at for another interview with some special guests. Tony?
Hey, thanks, Daryl. That's right. Joining me is Dr. Stephen Platts and Dr. Lori Glaze to talk to us a little bit about the human research that's going to be on this mission. You know, Steve, can you tell us a little bit more about what human research Crew-11 will be conducting?
Sure. We're very excited for the launch. We have 10 experiments flying on Crew-11. Everything from cardiovascular systems, central nervous system, all the way to genomics, the full breadth, and addressing many very important risks. for us to get to the moon and Mars.
That's a lot. You know, speaking of the moon and Mars, Lori, how does the human research conducted on space station help us for those future missions to the lunar surface and eventually Mars?
I'm so glad you asked that question. You know, a lot of times we talk about the future, you know, we're going to explore the moon and Mars. It's here. We are actually less than a year away from our first crewed launch, where we're going to send 4 crew out and around the moon for 10 days and bring them back. And then about a year after that, we're going to land on the moon. And we need to be ready, right? We need to be ready for the trips to the moon and then eventually to Mars. Our crew are going to need to be able to thrive in an environment where they're in microgravity, perhaps for as long as a year. And then we're going to need them to perform on the surface of Mars under 1/3 gravity and do their exploration activities. So we really need to understand how they're going to react and respond to that environment. And the experiments that are being done on space station today, it's such a unique laboratory where the kinds of things that Steve's talking about, we can study physiological responses to bones, muscles, blood flow. Mental health is incredibly important part of this activity. And the experiments that we can do, for example, growing plants without soil, recycling water. If we have the ability to recycle water, maybe 98% of the water that the crew uses, that's less resources we need to bring along. And then sensors that can detect, for example, solar storms so that our crew can take shelter or protect themselves while they're on their journey. So again, the experiments that are being done are incredibly important to our planning, which, as I said, we're launching in less than a year. We need to be ready.
That's right. I mean, a ton of valuable research that we are gathering. You know, speaking then on, you know, the research for Crew-11, Steve, I heard, you know, there's a new experiment that's going to space station. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, that's called manual piloting, and what that is looking for is the ability for the crew to land a vehicle on the lunar surface. So we're looking at the sensory motor aspects, balance, cognition, some of the things that Lori was talking about, and putting them all together, and we have a simulator that actually moves in all dimensions and allows the crew to feel like they're actually landing a spacecraft. And we're doing that pre-flight. We have some devices on station where we can do in-flight measures as well as post-flight. So that will give us a great idea of what we need to do to prepare the crew to land on the lunar surface.
That's great. I mean, you know, Lori, tell us a little bit more about those benefits of traveling then beyond low Earth orbit now.
Well, you know, the reasons we're going to the moon and eventually the ability to establish a permanent presence on the surface of the moon, a base per se that we can go back and visit multiple times, is the science that we want to conduct on the surface of the moon will be incredible. We're going to a place that is totally different than where the Apollo astronauts landed, so totally unique environment, different lighting conditions, different geology of the rocks. We anticipate there is water ice beneath the soil in some places near the South Pole where we're going to land humans for the first time ever. So we will be able to do incredibly unique science, but we'll also be able to continue the human research aspects for longer duration stays on the surface of the moon where we're trying to live and work, and that will again feed forward to help us be better prepared for Mars.
Absolutely, a ton of exciting things coming up. Thank you both so much for joining us. Now we'll send it back to Daryl and Nick.
Thank you, Tony. Crew-11's time in orbit will teach us how to keep humans healthy in space for the long haul. Meanwhile, on the moon-facing side of NASA's work, Artemis 2 astronauts, including Commander Reed Wiseman, are training for a very different challenge, a 10-day mission around the moon. And before they launch, NASA and the Department of Defense are making sure they know how to get them home, even in an emergency. Here's Reed with a behind-the-scenes look.
Hi, I'm NASA astronaut Reed Wiseman, commander of Artemis 2. I'm here at the Kennedy Space Center in Florida, and as you can see, work is well underway for our next mission to the moon, both on land and off the coast. Back in June, teams with NASA and the Department of Defense used an area of open water off KSC to rehearse procedures for a possible rescue after an ascent abort from the SLS rocket. Instead of using astronauts, they used a set of test mannequins staged inside the crew module test article, a full-scale mock-up of the Orion spacecraft. You can see pararescuers jump from a plane into the water with their specialized equipment, then approach the spacecraft, open the capsule, and transported the mannequins to the helicopter safely for medical care. This was one of 2 emergency procedures they rehearsed should they need to rescue me, Victor, Christina, and Jeremy during an abort scenario. And back here on land, now that the upper stage integration is complete inside the vehicle assembly building, teams with NASA's Exploration Ground Systems have been running SLS integrated testing, where they powered up both the core stage and boosters for the first time in preparation for our 10-day journey around the moon. That's a look at your Artemis Moon Minute.
For more Artemis updates, scan the QR code on your screen right here or visit nasa.gov/Artemis-Roman numeral 2. Nick, I know you're excited for Artemis.
Absolutely.
One of your fellow astronauts you spend a lot of time with, Christina Cook, is going up.
Yeah. You know, the astronaut corps is small, so you know everybody in the corps, and so I'm excited to see all 4 of them take their trip around the moon. It's exciting.
It's been a long time for NASA, more than 50 years. All right, now let's send it back to SpaceX in Hawthorne, California.
Thank you very much, Daryl and Nick, and it was impressive to hear that interview and that Moon Minute, and it's amazing to see how interwoven what's being done with these crewed missions to the International Space Station and how they impact moving forward and the Artemis campaign. So incredible to see about how those 2 crews and how those 2 missions work together. Now, as we get back to today's launch, we're now approaching 20 minutes away in the countdown for NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 mission to the International Space Station. So let's take a look at Falcon 9 that's on your screen now, and that is a 2-stage rocket that is 29 feet tall and getting ready for liftoff, and again, approaching 20 minutes away. At launch time, it produces more than 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Sonia, that is impressive firepower.
Yeah, and rockets like Falcon 9 don't use all that thrust just to go straight up. Early in flight, Falcon 9 performs a gravity turn, which is a smooth pitch maneuver.
RP1 load complete.
Hearing good call-outs over the nets, which is a smooth pitch maneuver that tilts the rocket sideways to build up horizontal velocity. You may hear this call-out about 10 seconds into launch as the vehicle is pitching downrange. And once the first stage completes its portion of the mission, it shuts down and separates.
And a stage rocket like Falcon 9 sheds that booster to eliminate the weight and uncover the Merlin vacuum engine on stage 2. To reach orbit, the vehicle needs to go fast, hitting an orbital velocity of about 28,000 kilometers an hour. And that's just to keep it from falling back to Earth due to gravity. That's fast enough to lap the Earth in about 90 minutes or fly from New York to here in Hawthorne, California in under 10 minutes, which is about 7 times faster than the U.S. Air Force's SR-71 Blackbird.
After stage separation, today's booster will be landing at Landing Zone 1 at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. This particular booster will be returning to Earth for its 3rd time. The second stage takes over from there, powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, also known as the MVAC. With its extended nozzle and optimized design, the MVAC drives maximum performance, producing 220,000 pounds of thrust in the vacuum of space. On today's mission, we'll light that engine 4 times before deploying the final payload into orbit.
Now, so much of what makes Falcon 9 remarkable happens in flight.
SpaceX for countdown check-in brief.
Dragon's with you.
Okay, Xena, we have healthy Dragon, healthy Falcon 9, just like last time, so prop load is proceeding nominally. We do have one watch item that has popped up. There is a pop-up storm cell that is just to the north of the pad. Currently not violating any LCCs, but we are monitoring this particularly closely as it's moving offshore. We'll let you know if it starts trending towards blocking launch today, but again, not expecting that at this time.
Dragon copies all. We've got a healthy Dragon, healthy Falcon. We're proceeding towards launch. Only watch item is a storm cell that is north of the pad moving offshore. We'll continue monitoring, but otherwise looking great.
That's a good readback.
And great communications there from the team here at SpaceX on the ground in Hawthorne, monitoring what we've been keeping an eye on throughout the broadcast here today is that weather popping up, but everything else looks strong and healthy. The Falcon 9, the capsule itself, and the crew, they're still ready to roll as we're now about 17 minutes away from the launch. Now, talking back to Falcon 9, and what remarkable happens is what happens in flight. It's the first stage, landing itself on land or on a drone ship in the middle of the ocean, the fairings that can parachute back, all ready for another flight to space. Every part of Falcon 9 is a part of a larger design that comes together to do one thing, and that's escape Earth's gravity.
And getting to space is the first step to building our multi-planetary future. At the top of Falcon 9 today, the crew is sitting inside Dragon Endeavour. Dragon has played a significant role in advancing our future in space by safely transporting crew to and from the International Space Station. There are currently 5 Dragon spacecraft supporting human spaceflight missions: Endeavour, Resilience, Endurance, Freedom, and our 5th and final Dragon, Grace, which just launched the Axiom 4 mission last month. Designed with safety as the highest priority, Dragon is capable of carrying up to 7 passengers to and from Earth orbit.
The Dragon spacecraft has
Stage 2 LOX load has started.
16 Draco thrusters. As you heard that great call out there, as the fueling continuing to make its way into the rocket. And those 16 Draco thrusters can be used in space to help navigate the spacecraft to its destination, each providing 90 pounds of force. Now, that doesn't include the 8 Super Draco thrusters used for an abort, which are no longer active once the crew is in orbit.
To date, Dragon has been to orbit 53 times, including 48 trips to the International Space Station and 18 human spaceflight missions. And as we mentioned earlier, today's Dragon, Endeavour, has been pretty busy, having also flown NASA's Crew-2 mission, Axiom 1, and NASA's Crew-6 and Crew-8 missions. Overall, for the Dragon fleet, this will be Dragon's 49th visit to the space station and its 19th human spaceflight mission overall, and the 5th Dragon flight this year. Dragon is the first private spacecraft to take humans to the orbiting lab, having flown 300,000 pounds of cargo and more than 1,000 experiments to space, as well as 70 crew members representing 20 countries. Our versatile Dragon spacecraft can autonomously dock with the International Space Station when outfitted with a docking adapter, which is just how it's configured for today's flight. And when it's not going to the space station and it's in free flyer mode, the docking adapter can be swapped out for a cupola, as it was back during the Inspiration 4 mission. Another option we have is the Skywalker hardware, which supports extravehicular activities or spacewalks, as we did during the Polaris Dawn mission. And amazingly, there has been a Dragon in space for 1,358 consecutive days since Crew 3.
Now, with T-0 coming up in about 14 minutes or so, our teams are continuing to do a series of system checks to ensure Dragon and the Falcon 9 are ready, with fueling continuing to get underway. And again, we're monitoring that weather that the teams here at SpaceX are keeping an eye on and have been relaying up to the crew. So let's check in with Ronnie with the latest.
Thanks, Joseph. So as you've heard, we are still on track for an on-time launch today, and we're monitoring lots of different factors as we get closer to liftoff. Most importantly, both Dragon and Falcon 9, of course carrying our Crew-11 astronauts, continue to be healthy. You heard that we've wrapped up Stage 2 RP-1 loading, and that Stage 2 liquid oxygen loading also wrapped up on time at about 16.5 minutes to go. The launch escape system is also armed. That's, of course, the system designed to propel Dragon away from Falcon 9 in the unlikely event of an emergency. And the Eastern Range is monitoring keep-out zones along the flight ascent corridor and is tracking no issues for today's launch. Weather continues to be a watch item, so we'll keep an eye on that. But for now, we are go for the 6th mission of Dragon Endeavour. It is a fantastic milestone for Dragon, and here at SpaceX, we could not be more excited. So to add a little something extra to our celebration, I've got our Dragon plush hanging out with me here in front of Mission Control. Now, this guy is not the zero gravity indicator for today's mission, but do keep an eye out for that once Crew-11 reaches orbit. This is, though, a fun nod to all the successful flights that Dragon has made, and all of the crews that we have been so lucky to work with. I think this is a great way to celebrate today's flight milestone, and I really have appreciated joining you all. Thanks for joining me at the status desk for all of our coverage today. With that, go Dragon, go Crew-11, and I'm going to hand it back to Sandra for status update from Houston.
Thanks, Ronnie. That plush is cute. I'm going to have to get one for myself. Back here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room at NASA's Johnson Space Center in Houston, teams continue to work around the clock to monitor activities aboard the orbital outpost. Leading the team inside the room today is NASA Flight Director Scott Stover. The team in Mission Control and the team in Hawthorne, as well as the astronauts aboard the International Space Station, will track the autonomous docking of Dragon Endeavour when they enter into joint operations. This will happen when the spacecraft enters the approach ellipsoid, which is the invisible boundary stretching 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers that helps us monitor all arriving and departing spacecraft. It's essentially the neighborhood of the International Space Station. Once docked, crew members in both Dragon and aboard the International Space Station will perform a series of leak checks and then will work to open the spacecraft's hatch for Crew-11 to float into the space station and begin their stay. We anticipate that the hatch will be opened about an hour and a half after docking occurs. When they enter the orbital outpost, crew will be greeted by the rest of the Expedition 73 crew and will come together for opening remarks. But for now, that's going to be all from us here in Mission Control for today, as the anticipation continues to build for launch in less than 20 minutes from now. So, how's it looking on the Space Coast, Daryl?
Well, we've got a mix in the weather. There's some clouds that are building, but so far still looking good, okay for launch. It's a watch item at the moment, and so we're keeping our eyes to the skies. Also, this is a first for our broadcast team right here. An astronaut who once sat right here where Nick is sitting as a commentator is now minutes from flying to space. Zena Cardman was once in this very seat, the one that Nick Hague is sitting in now, less than a year ago. She was supporting Nick as he launched with Crew-9. She was originally set to command that mission, but when Crew-9 had the shift and had the change up of assignments, she had to step back to help get the team off the ground. And here's what she said, Nick, after watching you and your crew go into space.
Every crewed launch that I have ever watched has really brought me a lot of emotion. This one today was especially unique. I think it was hard not to watch that rocket lift off without thinking, that's my rocket and that's my crew. But I also know that I'm not the only person who can think that. Of course, we have Stephanie Wilson here today, but I mean, there are many, many people who made this mission happen, and there are people on orbit who will be taking this capsule home. And it makes me very proud to know that I am one of many people who can say, that's my crew, that's my rocket. Makes me really proud, makes me feel very connected to this mission that we all get to take part of. Go Crew-9.
An emotion-filled Zena Cardman in that moment, and she is going to give us some words any moment now.
Dragon SpaceX, confirm crew displays are configured for launch.
Your thoughts on hearing that after you launched?
SpaceX, Dragon, displays are configured for launch. It is our honor, our privilege, and our choice to take part in something much greater than any individual, but it's the individuals who make this endeavor great. To each of you at SpaceX and NASA, to our partners at JAXA and Roscosmos, to family, friends, and mentors, you fly with us today. Arigato gozaimashita. Spasibo большое. Thank you. With gratitude and focus, Crew-11 is ready.
And more words.
Crew-11, sentiment is the same on the ground from everyone staying here. We have enjoyed working with you in the preparation for the mission. Looking forward to doing the same in flight. Good luck. Enjoy the ride.
And more words from Zena Cardman. We just heard from her live.
Yeah, it's like I started the show. There isn't any place I'd rather be than here today. What Zena said is so true, you know, and it's this palpable feeling that, hey, that's my crew. Those are my friends. You know, hey, that's my commander. And just to be here and know that, you know, I've done my small part to help support them and along their way, and there'll be more support that happens in the future. And to be able to see behind the scenes everybody else that is contributing to that is, that's what makes this all so special, is it's not about the individual. Spaceflight has nothing to do with individuals. It's all about us working together.
100%. Well said, Nick. And kudos to both of you for showing an immense amount of class. You signed up to do this role almost immediately after getting into space, and we heard from you saying, I want to be there for Zena. Thank you for being here. And go Crew-11. And so with just 7 minutes to go, a little over 7 minutes, we want to send it back to Hawthorne for the final countdown.
Thank you, Daryl. Thank you, Nick. And those were beautiful words from Zena Cardman. You can hear the emotions behind them and what they're looking forward to getting ready for launch. And they say Crew-11 is ready. As you mentioned, about 7 minutes and change to go until we have liftoff, and we're still awaiting the final propellant loading to complete, and then we'll get into engine chill, and more milestones will be along the way. It's going to be about a 9-minute ride to orbit, and then Dragon in the second stage will continue to coast for a few minutes after that once the first stage and second stage have performed. You'll be hearing some of those performance calls as we get into that final countdown, and then after liftoff. These are SpaceX flight controllers reporting on the trajectory, speed, booster, and performance, and the key milestones, but there are some other calls calls that you'll hear the crew make as well, especially after liftoff. The crew will report out a few number and letter combinations which mark different abort zones throughout the flight up the eastern seaboard. The first two, 1A and 1B, are abort modes available.
Has started.
And right on cue for the engine chill that has begun. And those first stage abort zones, again, 1A and 1B for that first stage. Next are 2A through E. Those will come into play once the second stage kicks in. They'll only hear that 2A call. And diverting a little bit from the other naming systems, we'll hear the call Shannon, which refers to Shannon, Ireland. This means that the crew could target off the coast of Ireland if they needed to abort late in that second stage burn. You'll hear these different calls throughout the flight uphill along the way, and the performance callouts from the guidance, navigation, and control officer, and also the propulsion lead. So we're coming up on T-minus 6.5 minutes. We heard that the engine chill is started, and that means that that small trickle of fuel making its way into the engine to prime it
Stage
for
1 fuel load
launch.
complete.
So we already heard that stage 1 engine chill has already started, which is a key process that prepares the engines for flight. Right now, the prop in the tanks is isolated from the engines. Sorry. The prop in the tanks has already started trickling into the Merlin engine pumps as the engines are chilling for the start sequence. And we do this because the super chilled and densified liquid oxygen is really, really cold. And we use this process to bring the engine hardware down to a cooler temperature before flowing all of the LOX and propellant into it during flight. At liftoff, Falcon 9 is consuming 700 gallons of fuel per second. So engine chill helps us to prevent thermal shock and ensures nominal engine performance. Shortly coming up, we should also hear the call out for stage 1 RP1 load completion.
As you mentioned, engine chill is now underway. We're getting ready for those next call-outs that'll be coming up here shortly, as we are now almost 5 minutes away from liftoff, and that's where they're going to configure for terminal count. And that will be a call for Dragon to configure to terminal count and transition into internal power.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
And at this point, the Dragon onboard computers
configured for terminal count.
Perfect, right on schedule, and those onboard computers now taking control of the spacecraft. You also heard the call out for pressurizing to give extra structural stability for the rocket as it makes its way uphill. So we're approaching now 4.5 minutes away, and then around that time, you'll hear, you mentioned it there, the strong back retract, and that'll allow provide access to Falcon 9's fueling lines and umbilicals for prop load and different gases being loaded on board. But right now, everything's starting to wrap up, and Somya, it's exciting to get to this.
Strong back retract has started.
Exciting to get to this point of the countdown. As you heard it right there, the strong back retract is on its way.
So we have a great view on our screen of the clamp arms opening up just around stage 2 under Dragon in preparation for strong back retract. We have some really great views on our screen of that happening right now.
And you can see it just moving ever so slightly away from Falcon 9 and the Dragon spacecraft, those clamp arms opening. And again, those late stages, those fuel lines starting to wind down their fueling procedures as we're about to hit T-minus 3 minutes until launch. Second stage loading will wrap up shortly after the first, and you've probably noticed those white clouds venting from around the rocket. That isn't smoke.
Stage 1 LOX load complete.
That's condensation, as stage 1 liquid oxygen loading has been completed. As liquid oxygen warms slightly inside the tanks, some of it boils off, and that gas is vented to manage pressure. When the vented oxygen hits that warm Florida humid air,
in terminal count and on internal power,
it instantly condenses into those clouds. As you just now heard, the Dragon now in prop load complete, on into internal power. It's fully fueled. The rocket and Crew-11 are ready for liftoff. And this rocket now transitioning into internal power. The gas closeouts will also begin to purge all the feed lines and allow Falcon 9 to be isolated. And then they'll get vented overboard through the umbilicals and strong back retract.
So coming up in just under 20 seconds, we should hear the call out that LOX load will be completed on stage 2, which will mean that there will be 1 million pounds of propellant loaded onto Falcon 9 at that point. We're coming up on that call out in just a few seconds from now.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
Now that that's complete, we will vent down the TE, which will produce a white cloud off the side of the rocket, which is totally normal and expected.
Dragon is in auto idle.
Auto idle puts that rocket in a state the flight computers understand before it takes over, and that's making sure the transition to the final countdown is smooth and all the flight computers on board are in sync with each other and configured for launch. We're now 90 seconds away from
Ground
launch.
gas closeouts have started. Expect loud venting.
And there's the gas closeout that Sonia was just talking about, and now inside 80 seconds from the launch of NASA SpaceX's Crew-11.
On countdown net, hold. We are standing down for a violation of weather rules.
Launch route sequence is aborted.
So as you've heard over the nets, we did just have a hold called at the T-1 minute mark.
And that hold due to weather, that was something that we've been keeping an eye on. Our team here in SpaceX and Hawthorne, as well as in NASA, we're monitoring that throughout today's broadcast in preparation for launch. But unfortunately, standing down looks to be the case as the weather has created that violation. But we'll continue to monitor and await for the news officially from the teams on the ground as that weather violation looks to come into play for launch today.
Dragon SpaceX, bad luck on weather there. We just got clipped by a cumulus cloud right over the pad, so ended up scrubbing for weather. With that, you are go to proceed to 5.100 for launch scrub. We'll begin offloading the rocket.
Dragon copies all 5.100. Too bad, but we'll be ready next time.
And there you heard the call up to the crew that unfortunately the weather just not playing alongside with today's excitement of the launch for NASA SpaceX's Crew-11. But we have mentioned a couple times throughout the broadcast today that there are backup opportunities starting as early as tomorrow. 11:43 a.m. Eastern time is what the target time is for tomorrow's next attempt for launch for Crew-11. But it came right down to the wire, Somia, with that T-1 minute. But you heard on the loops there that it was just clipped, as they said, by a cumulus cloud to violate the weather rule. So unfortunately, today's launch attempt has been scrubbed due to weather.
You know, and there are 1,000 different ways that a launch can go wrong. And so we want to ensure the safety and reliability, even if it is a weather scrub. So we will stay with coverage of the crew as we follow them through the egress procedures and make their way back to crew quarters for now.
And you said the key word right there, and that is safety, the safety of the crew and everyone involved on this launch and opportunity, because that's what was talked about even in yesterday's press briefings with all the program managers and representatives of NASA, SpaceX, Roscosmos, and JAXA, is that we'll launch when we're ready and everything lines up the way it needs to be. And unfortunately, due to weather, not the case today. But to recap and look back at everything that Crew-11 has done, they walked right up to the T-1 minute to launch mark as everybody was safe and sound. They went through their procedures earlier today, did super-latent checks, also did communications checks, and were able to go all the way to the pad, climb aboard the Dragon spacecraft, and get ready for launch today. But again, unfortunately, due to weather, it will not happen, and we will target that next launch attempt, which again is going to be tomorrow at 11:43 a.m. Eastern time. We will stay with coverage of the crew as we follow them through the egress procedures, getting out of the spacecraft and making their way back to crew quarters. And to do that, we're going to head back out onto the space coast of Florida and join Daryl Nail and team as today's launch attempt for NASA's SpaceX Crew-11 has been scrubbed due to weather. Daryl?
All right, thank you, Joseph and Samia. We appreciate your coverage there. And now back here with NASA astronaut Nick Hague. We just returned from being outside. We were planning to watch the launch right there from a nice viewing spot here at the press site, the Kennedy Space Center in Florida. And unfortunately, even as we walked out, Nick, we got a sense that this might not happen because clouds had been building in and around the area. We had dark clouds overhead of us. We got up on our area to watch the launch and heard a Phase 1 lightning alert go off. And then I just, my heart kind of sank a little bit because I thought that might be it.
Yep. Then you see the clock stop.
Yes.
And you know it's happened. So it's disappointing, but there's a reason we do it, and that's to keep everybody safe.
It's so critically important. As you look at this shot here, you can see that just right over top, you've got some darkened clouds in the area. This was a result of a sea breeze that when we started the day, the launch weather officer improved our forecast to 90% go, but there was a 10% concern that the sea breeze was going to develop earlier in the day than originally forecast. And that sea breeze, which is very, this is very common here in Florida in July, once that air starts moving over the ocean and onto land and meets the warm air, our blue skies went to cumulus clouds scattered across the spaceport. And we just had one get just inside the 10-mile radius.
Dragon SpaceX, for awareness, we're looking at approximately 50 minutes for the prop offload time. So it should be approximately 1700 UTC when we are able to proceed with 5.100 and rotate the seats.
Dragon copies, we're looking at about 50 minutes for prop offload, so 1700 ETC for the rest of 5.100 and seat rotation.
Good readback.
And so what is that, real quick, what does that mean, Nick? They are going to rotate the seats?
Yeah, so it's important to know that right now you're looking at a fully fueled rocket with an armed launch escape system. And so the crew is in the same posture that they were in the 45 minutes leading up to launch. They've got to be in that posture until they can offload all that propellant, which takes about the exact same amount of time to offload as it took to put on, as well as disarm that launch escape system. And so this is a very active rocket right now, and they, that launch escape system, if something went wrong, even now it's still protecting them.
It's a great note there. That this is very much a dynamic situation even now with a scrub called. The teams have to work through their procedures to safe the launch pad, the rocket, and the capsule from being just minutes from launch. And we were in that posture ready for launch, and now we have to undo that, right?
Yeah,
very carefully.
You got to back out of all of that, and then once the rocket is defueled, we've got all the fuel out of there. We can disarm the launch escape system. You still need the pad team to be able to come and get out there to get into the white room and help open up that side hatch and get the crew out. And so the scrub process is not a quick one.
Just to finish a thought that I had said, and I think this view on the left basically shows you what the issue is. That's rain on the right half of the screen there. That's a rain cloud with rain coming down. And on the left hand, we were dealing with sun poking through the clouds on our side. We could literally see the clouds kind of going over top of our heads, getting close to the pad. And the standoff area is 10-mile radius around the pad for these dark clouds and cumulus clouds. And that is a safety factor. We'll talk a little bit about that. That is because you don't want to send a rocket through a tall cloud like that could generate some energy from the rocket passing through it.
Yeah, just the same as if you're on a commercial airline flight, you don't necessarily want your pilot to take you through a severe thunderstorm. We don't want to do that with a rocket.
And so we are erring on the side of safety in this situation. But as Nick pointed out, The rocket that you are looking at is a fully fueled, ready to launch Falcon 9. As we now see, they are starting to allow some of the liquid oxygen to vent off as they begin detanking the rocket from its super chilled liquid oxygen and its RP-1, which is the kerosene-based propellant.
Dragon, SpaceX, propellant offload update. Estimating about 45 more minutes for propellant offload.
Dragon copies. Additional 4 or 5 minutes for prop offload.
Now, as you recall your procedures for the crew, getting out of the capsule and getting back into their vehicles and going back, take me through the timeline of the scrub procedure.
Yeah, it's a fairly straightforward procedure. You're running the launch procedure in reverse, essentially, and so they're strapped in. The seats are rotated up in a launch configuration. As soon as they detank, they're going to disarm the launch escape system. So you're looking at it's 45 minutes to get rid of the liquid oxygen and RP-1. Once that's off, then they'll be able to disarm the launch escape system, rotate the seats down. At that point, the arm will come over and the ground team, the pad team will be able to come up there. They'll open the side hatch and then help them get out of the capsule just like they helped them get into the capsule. So you're looking on the order of, an hour, a little bit longer.
And you want that rocket fully detanked?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You've got cryogenic propellants, oxidizers,
moving, flowing,
and you want to make sure that that's all secure before you put people around it. That's the way the system is designed. It's different on other launch vehicles. Other launch vehicles, the Soyuz I launched on was fueled when we showed up to it. But while you're moving the fuel on and off, you minimize the number of people that are around.
That's exactly right. And the SLS rocket is similar in that it gets fully fueled and tanked, and then they bring the astronauts on board. SpaceX does it so they can do that tanking as the very last part of the mission timeline. And this also allows for a quick tanking, relatively speaking, for a rocket. And then allows you to detank it. But they're using super densified liquid oxygen as well. So you mentioned it. High energy systems are engaged here, and so we are now unwinding that as we proceed through the scrub procedure. If you're just joining us, we scrubbed this launch at T-minus 1 minute and 7 seconds until liftoff. We had a healthy rocket, a healthy spacecraft, we had a clear range, and we just had weather in the area, a cumulus cloud that just clipped the radius nearby within the launch area, the 10-mile radius. It got into that stand